Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about histograms, which is just kind of vitally important. So we're going to discuss histograms today because I realise that I mention them all of the time.
Histogram.
But some people don't know what they mean. So we're just going to run through them in terms of what I look at them for, why they're vitally important, why everything you need to know is in your histogram. If you haven't already, please do remember to press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. I haven't asked you to do that in a while, but if you haven't already, please do remember to subscribe. It makes a big difference to me and I appreciate it. First things first, what is a histogram? Histogram is just a graph. Just think of it as a graph. So you've got two sides to the graph and like a line down the bottom. Do you know what? I'll just draw a graph somewhere on the screen now, which should probably be easier. What you need to know is that the left side of the graph always, I think it's always, the left side of the graph is black. Think of it as no data, 0% color, 0% brightness. It's completely black, okay? The right-hand side of the graph is always, I think, white. So think of it as no data at all because it's just completely 100% brightness. It's white. Those two values are what we call the edges of our histogram. So you've got the left side of the histogram and the right side of the histogram. This is going to be confusing because you guys are watching this and this is left and this is right. The histogram itself, usually I would suggest not paying it too much attention in terms of the mountains that are made in the middle, okay? So I've heard of it referred to as mountains. It's a really good way of thinking about it. So on any histogram there will be peaks and troughs. All that represents is a count of the pixels in the scene. So think of it as the camera, Lightroom, whatever it is. It's taken all of the individual pixels from an image, and then in terms of their brightness, from black to white, it then stacks them in a graph. So you can see which brightness level is the majority of the image. I hope that makes sense. So if you can see anything on your histogram, then you've got data in there, okay? If it's pressed all the way up against the left-hand side, that means that you've got loads of black pixels. No data, clipped shadows, usually bad, unless you're photographing on a black background and that's what you're going for. The other side of that would be if all of the image data, that mountain, the trough, everything was pressed up against the right-hand side. That would mean that all of the pixels in the image are white. Completely white, we don't want that's clipped highlights, blown highlights. It's kind of bad. There's no detail there. It's just white. The perfect histogram, read sarcasm, technically is a bell curve. A bell curve just means that the peak's right in the middle and it fades off to the sides. Now a bell curve is the ideal histogram, but it's very rare that you'll take a shot or finish a shot or whatever with a bell curve as the histogram. That's like not normal, unless you're like a landscape photographer, and then maybe. But usually even then, probably not. Different images will have the data pushed or stacked in terms of its mountains into one side or the other. The important point to know about histogram is nothing's touching the sides. If it's touching the sides and you're not deliberately clipping blacks or clipping whites, then something's gone wrong and your exposure is out. Now you might hear people saying, why do you always expose to the left? I've used that because that's what people ask me all the time. Exposing to the left just means that your peak, the main bulk of your data, is in the shadows portion. It's to the left of the center of the histogram. So if you're exposing to the left, it means technically you're underexposing. If you're exposing to the right, it means you're technically overexposing. But I want to just kind of like discuss this a little bit because it's not that important. It doesn't matter. So don't worry too much about where that mountain is as long as it's not got any parts touching the sides. That way you know you're in for a winner. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk you through a few images which I've popped up on the screen here, which show you this in action, okay? So these are edited, actually I don't think that's, okay, some of them are raw files, that's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to look at them. So just to illustrate the point that I was making in terms of the image itself might be quite light and therefore it will look like it's overexposed, but actually it's not because it's not clipped. That was long. Using this image of Alf as an example, I'll walk you through the histogram. So the histogram is split into 5 chunks. So you've got your blacks at the far left, then next to them you've got shadows, then next to that you've got midtones, next to that you've got highlights, and then right to the right hand side you have got whites. Okay, so you've got those 5 sections. Now they're not all equal in width. The blacks and whites are much thinner. The midtones is the largest section. Okay, so when we're in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw or whatever imaging program you use, it doesn't matter, you'll have a histogram show. So this is a super bright image, but with highlight clipping on, there are no clipped pixels in this shot. Now really it could have been half a stop under, if we're being honest, but in terms of your blacks, there's no data pressed up against the black side. It looks like there's some data pressed up against the white side, but there are no clipped areas showing when we put our clipping flag on. So I'm quite confident that we're okay. However, you can just click and drag and pull them down if you want to. That would be clipped. So you can see when you look at an image like this, even if we expose that probably, you know, about kind of right-ish, kind of there, it's not a good image, but it demonstrates the point well. So here you can see we've got a massive peak. Now, if you were to look at just histogram, you say, well, this is really overexposed, but actually it's not. It's snow. Snow is white, snow is bright, and therefore it's kind of right. Let's look at an image that is much darker. So the other side of this is an image like this. We've got no clipped shadows in there, but the histogram is weighted. The mountain is very much to the left-hand side. That means basically this is underexposed, but actually, you know, it's not underexposed. You could lift it a bit, but then you lose the impact. So there's a decision that's been made there to drop it more darker into the shadows and therefore pushing your editing to the left, not the right or central, as it were. That's a pretty solid bell curve there on that shot. That's a pretty good, even histogram. Nothing in the clipped, either side is looking good. We like this shot. There's not much you would change in terms of the exposure on this. It's a good overall exposure. But in camera, if you can view your histogram either on your viewing, so like when you review the images, or you can view it when you're shooting if you're using a mirrorless camera, for example, keeping an eye on it and just seeing how far it's shifting from side to side. Is there data up at either end? I personally shoot slightly to the left to protect my highlights, which means that I slightly underexpose in camera to then be able to control and lift my shadows, but retain all of my highlight detail. That's just a personal preference. I think it comes from shooting Nikon, to be honest. Highlight is not great with Nikon. With Canon, you've got a little bit more flexibility there to pull the data back, but that's not the point. The point is that histograms are vitally important. Any question that you need to ask, is my screen brightness too bright? Is this image overexposed or underexposed? Do I have any clipped data? Do I have clipped highlights? Do I have clipped shadows? All of those questions can be answered by just looking at your histogram. So learn it, understand it. You don't need to, you know, pray to it or have it in a holy shrine, but it is important to understand. If that was helpful for you, please do let me know. Drop it in the comments box below. Please do subscribe because it makes a world of the difference for me, and I'll see you all again really, really soon.